react, 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 react. You think you're in control because sometimes you do something kind of strong or powerful, but it all stems from reaction. You're in reaction mode throughout the course of your life. You are currently in tactical hell. You are continually reacting against what people say, what people do. You're never controlling the situation. Well, strategy is one of those ways that you alter how you look at the world. It's like a paradigm shift. Because you're going around in life being extremely unstrategic. And all that matters, all that is required is you alter it, you reverse that form of thinking. You reverse your perspective on that. Are they trying to deliberately upset me? Okay, it worked. All right? The best response is to not get upset.
Never react, never explain, and just ignore. People often believe that silence is weakness because society teaches us to always have an answer. We are told to defend our reputation, justify our choices, and respond to every accusation. But notice something about people who constantly explain themselves. The more they speak, the less convincing they become. Every unnecessary explanation sends an invisible message that says, I need your approval to feel secure. Truly confident people do not waste their energy trying to convince everyone that they are right. They understand that people will believe what they want to believe, regardless of how many words are spoken. The same principle applies to emotional reactions. There are people who will deliberately provoke you, not because they want the truth, but because they want your attention. They know that if they can make you angry, frustrated, or defensive, they have interrupted your focus. The argument itself is never the victory. Your reaction is. The moment you abandon your peace to satisfy someone else's challenge, you begin playing by their rules instead of your own. Think about how often unnecessary conflicts begin. One careless comment, one sarcastic message, one disrespectful opinion. Suddenly, an entire day is consumed by proving a point that will change nothing. Hours are wasted replaying conversations, writing long messages, defending intentions, and seeking justice from people who were never interested in understanding you. In the end, nothing meaningful is gained except exhaustion. Meanwhile, the person who provoked you has already moved on, while you continue carrying the emotional weight. This is exactly why ignoring is so powerful. Ignoring is not pretending something never happened. Ignoring is making a conscious decision. It is refusing to donate your time, your emotions, and your attention to people who have done nothing to deserve them. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Every person who succeeds in stealing it also steals a portion of your energy. That is why wise people become extremely selective about what they choose to notice. There is another reason you should never rush to explain yourself. Someone committed to misunderstanding you will twist every sentence you speak. The more you explain, the more material they have to criticize. Instead of ending the conflict, you often feed it. Sometimes your silence communicates more confidence than 1,000 carefully chosen words ever could. Silence tells people that your identity does not depend on their agreement. This does not mean accepting disrespect or allowing others to walk over you. It means understanding the difference between responding with purpose and reacting out of emotion. Powerful people choose their responses carefully, but they refuse to react simply because someone expects them to. Imagine someone throwing bait into the water, hoping a fish will bite. Every insult, every rumor, every unnecessary criticism is bait. Most people bite immediately because their ego cannot tolerate being ignored. But the person who swims past the bait cannot be caught. They remain free because they understand that not every challenge deserves an answer, and not every opinion deserves a place in their mind. As you move through life, remember this simple principle. Every time you refuse to react, every time you refuse to explain, and every time you choose to ignore what does not deserve your attention, you protect something far more valuable than your reputation. You protect your inner peace, your focus, and your power. And once you understand the hidden strength behind emotional control, the next step is learning why explaining yourself often destroys the very respect you are trying to earn. The moment you feel the need to explain yourself, pause for a second and ask one simple question: who are you really trying to convince? Most of the time, it is not someone who genuinely wants to understand you. It is someone who has already formed an opinion and is simply waiting for you to justify yourself. This is where countless people unknowingly lose their influence. They believe that if they provide enough reasons, enough evidence, or enough words, they can change another person's perception. But confidence is rarely built through explanation. More often, it is weakened by it. Someone determined to dislike you will find a reason, even if you explain yourself perfectly. Someone committed to misunderstanding, you will twist your words until they fit the story they already believe. The more you talk, the more opportunities you give them to question, criticize, or distort your message. This is why endless explanations often create more confusion instead of more respect. When your actions remain steady over time, they become your explanation. Nothing is more persuasive than a life that reflects what you claim to believe. This does not mean you should never communicate or clarify genuine misunderstandings. Confident people explain only when it serves a meaningful purpose. Insecure people explain because they cannot tolerate someone thinking badly of them. There is another hidden danger in constant explanation. It teaches people that they can demand access to your private decisions whenever they choose. Every time someone questions your choices and you immediately justify yourself, you reinforce the idea that they are entitled to an answer. Over time, this creates an unhealthy pattern. People begin expecting explanations for your boundaries, your priorities, your ambitions, and even your personal happiness. But your life is not a courtroom where every decision requires a defense. Notice how people react when they receive no unnecessary explanation. At first, they may become uncomfortable. They may push harder, ask more questions, or even become frustrated. Why? Because they expected control. They expected you to chase their approval. When you remain calm instead, something changes. They begin realizing that your confidence is not dependent on their agreement. That realization often earns more respect than any carefully prepared argument ever could. If someone criticizes you, there is no need to react emotionally. If someone misunderstands your intentions, there is no need to explain every detail of your thinking. And if someone continues judging you despite your silence, sometimes the wisest decision is simply to ignore what cannot be changed. These three habits strengthen one another. When you stop reacting impulsively, you stop feeling the urge to explain. And when you stop explaining everything, it becomes much easier to ignore opinions that have no real value. Your energy is limited. Every unnecessary explanation drains a little more of it. Every attempt to gain approval takes your attention away from your own growth. The people who achieve extraordinary things understand that their mission is more important than defending themselves against every misunderstanding. When your actions become stronger than your words, you no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. And that is the moment strategic ignoring becomes one of your greatest sources of strength. By now, you understand that reacting impulsively gives away your power, and constantly explaining yourself weakens your confidence. But there is one final habit that ties these lessons together, and it is often the hardest to practice. That habit is learning to ignore with intention. Most people hear the word ignore and assume it means running away from problems or pretending difficult situations do not exist. In reality, strategic ignoring is not avoidance. It is one of the highest forms of self-control. It is the ability to decide what deserves your attention, and more importantly, what does not. Your attention is one of the most valuable assets you possess. When someone knows they can access you whenever they want, your attention slowly stops feeling valuable. It becomes expected, and whatever becomes expected eventually loses its impact. This is where the dark psychology, not as a game, not as manipulation, but as an understanding of human nature. People notice what changes. People notice what disappears. People notice what is no longer guaranteed. Imagine a man who is always available. Every message gets an instant reply. Every moment of silence makes him nervous. Every small change in behavior forces him to seek answers. Over time, he communicates something without realizing it. He communicates that his attention is unlimited, and unlimited things rarely feel valuable. Now imagine the opposite. A man who has goals, a man who has purpose, A man who does not abandon his priorities every time emotions appear. When he gives attention, it feels intentional. When he is silent, it is not because he is playing games. It is because his life does not revolve around another person's reactions. That difference changes everything, because attention becomes meaningful when it is given by choice rather than need. Human beings are naturally curious about changes in behavior. When someone who is always available suddenly becomes focused on their own life, people notice. Questions begin appearing. What changed? Why is he different? Where is his attention now? And the moment curiosity appears, attention follows. This is why constant pursuit often weakens attraction, while emotional self-control strengthens it. The more desperately someone seeks attention, the less valuable that attention appears. The more someone values their own time and energy, the more others begin valuing it too. The irony is that most men lose respect, not because they care too much, but because they make caring their entire identity. They stop focusing on growth. They stop focusing on purpose. They stop focusing on themselves. Their attention becomes completely dependent on another person's response. And dependency always weakens influence. The strongest position is never making someone miss you. The strongest position is becoming so focused on your own growth that your attention is no longer available on demand. Because when silence comes from self-respect instead of insecurity, it creates something far more powerful than words ever could. It creates curiosity. And curiosity is where the real psychology of silence begins. Once attention is no longer given freely, something interesting begins to happen. The constant noise disappears, and in its place, curiosity starts to grow. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human psychology. Most people believe attention creates value. In reality, attention creates value only when it is balanced. When attention becomes endless, predictable, and guaranteed, it often loses the very impact it was supposed to create. Think about how human nature works. People rarely spend much time thinking about what they fully understand. They think about what they cannot fully predict. They think about what feels uncertain. They think about what raises questions in their minds. This is why mystery has always been powerful, not because mystery is manipulation, but because mystery activates curiosity, and curiosity captures attention. When a man constantly explains himself, constantly updates someone about everything he is doing, and constantly seeks reassurance, there is very little left to discover. Every thought is revealed. Every emotion is exposed. Every reaction becomes predictable. Over time, the interaction loses tension, and without tension, curiosity fades. Now compare that to someone who remains calm, focused, and emotionally controlled. He is not trying to create mystery. He is simply living his life. He is focused on his goals. He is focused on his purpose. He is not constantly seeking validation through communication. As a result, there are gaps, and the human mind naturally fills gaps. People begin wondering what he is thinking. People begin wondering what has his attention. People begin wondering why he seems different. The more someone tries to force attention, the less natural it becomes. The more someone focuses on themselves, the more naturally attention often follows. This is the paradox that many people never understand. The strongest presence is often created by what is not said. Think about conversations. Sometimes a single moment of silence creates more impact than 10 minutes of talking. Why? Because silence forces reflection. Silence creates space. Silence allows the other person to think rather than simply react. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because they believe they must constantly fill it. They believe every pause needs an explanation. Every misunderstanding requires a defense. Every emotional moment requires immediate action. But emotionally strong individuals understand something different. They understand that not every feeling requires a reaction. Not every situation requires a response. Not every silence needs to be broken. This self-control creates an entirely different energy. It communicates confidence. It communicates patience. It communicates that your emotional state is not dependent on immediate validation. And that is rare. Human beings are drawn toward people who appear comfortable with themselves. When someone is constantly chasing attention, they communicate need. When someone remains focused on their own path, they communicate value. The difference is subtle but powerful because people tend to respect what appears self-sufficient more than what appears desperate for approval. This is why silence becomes such a powerful part of emotional control. It is not about ignoring someone to provoke a reaction. It is about refusing to let every emotion dictate your behavior. It is about remaining centered when others become reactive. It is about understanding that your value does not increase because you are constantly available. And once curiosity begins replacing predictability, another shift occurs. People start paying closer attention, not because you demanded it, but because absence and emotional control naturally cause them to reevaluate the value of what is no longer constantly present. Curiosity may capture attention, but curiosity alone is not enough to create lasting respect. Eventually, every interaction reaches a point where emotions become involved, expectations appear, disappointments happen, misunderstandings occur, and this is where most people reveal their level of emotional maturity. The average person reacts. They react to every message. They react to every delay. They react to every change in behavior. They react to every emotion that passes through their mind. And because they react so quickly, they often lose control of the situation. This is why emotional control is one of the rarest forms of power, not because it allows you to control others, but because it prevents others from controlling you. Think about how many people destroy their own position simply because they cannot manage their emotions. A single moment of frustration causes them to say things they regret. A moment of insecurity causes them to seek reassurance they do not actually need. A moment of jealousy causes them to act impulsively. The emotion itself is not the problem. The lack of control is human nature respects stability. People naturally trust individuals who remain calm under pressure more than those who become emotional at every challenge. Why? Because emotional stability communicates confidence. It communicates self-respect. It communicates that your inner state is not dependent on external circumstances. This is where the art of silence becomes so powerful.